Am I probably not
Okay, so we're about to start.
I might not necessarily leave my video on all through because of power outage. So I'm able to conserve my battery. The phone
That's
battery
fine.
will last me all through the time. Yes, for my introduction, I'll allow them to see my face. Then probably towards
Okay.
the end. Yes,
All
so
right.
that
Thank you.
that's my battery. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I trust that your weekend has been amazing. And I trust that we have all been enjoying week 3 of the WiLG Women's Mentorship Program. So if you've seen the topics that we have been, engaging with and the mentors, they have been very intentional. And today we're going to talk about something that is really important, and that's public policy. The honest truth is that we need young people in the room. We need young people being aware about public policy and public service. We need more young people in the public service. So this is one of the amazing ways. Today we have Bushrah Temitope Balogun. She's my KIF sister. I met her when I was in Kaduna, when we served with the Kaduna state government. She's so grounded in what she does. Bushra is an amazing person, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy this session. And today she's going to be talking about public policy. Bushra is so passionate about women in politics. She's also passionate about inclusion. And today she's going to take us on a few sessions. So she's going to take us today on public policy, but she's also going to come back and talk about policy writing, policy analysis, because she's starting with you understanding public policy, and then she's going to dive into the practical aspects where you're going to have policy analysis and drafting policy documents. And then she would come again to take us on project development. So I'm really, really, project management and development and everything. So it's really a full package, and I really appreciate you, Bushra, for coming. Um, Bushra has done amazing work in the public sector and as well as in the private sector. And today we are privileged to have Bushrah Temitope Balogun in our midst, and she's going to be talking about public policy. So Bushra, my care sister, we welcome you to our midst, and we appreciate you speaking with us today. And the floor is yours. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I will just project your presentation now so we can start. So Bushra, over to you. Bushra, you're mute. So you have to mute.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. How about now? Okay. Sorry. I think it's okay. Yes. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm glad to be in your midst. And thank you, Veronica, for having me on board. And to the participants, it's nice to be in your midst. I'm sure Veronica has already done justice to my profile and it has been shared beforehand. So you actually know who you're speaking with. And today, I think because of time, we'll just quickly dive into what we'll be talking about. That's public policy. So I'm sorry I'll have to switch up my video so I can conserve my battery till the end of the class. So I can probably at intervals or probably towards the end you get to see my face again. So for people that will join in, you get to see my face again so I can conserve my battery. Thank you. So Veronica, can you start sharing the slides? I can't see yet. I think she dropped out already.
No, I'm sharing it. Can you see?
Oh, okay, okay. I didn't know you were there. Oh, okay.
Can you see the slides?
Not yet.
Okay, I've shared them. Okay, let me move to the next one. Can
I'm
you
not
see
even
it?
not even coming up yet on the screen, so I don't know if others are seeing it.
Please,
But
can any other person see?
I'm seeing the screen the way it is, so we need to confirm if others can see it. Let's know if it's just from my end.
Okay, yes, they can see.
Oh, they
Okay,
can see it. Then what's
yes.
happening? I can't see it. Yes,
Okay,
I can.
Okay,
Wow.
yes.
Then what's happening? Okay, yes. I can see. Yes,
Okay, okay, cool. All right, cool.
I can see it now too. Okay. Let's start. So today we'll be talking about introduction to public policy. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about policy, 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 and I don't mean in terms of government alone. I know when we hear policy, people think about government, but even across private sector, businesses, organizations, you hear when people talk about, I have a even at home, we have homes where parents have policies, because the idea of a policy is more like I'm setting a rule in my house. So your dad could tell you, in my house, there's a coffee of 9 p.m. Immediately, I set the rule. So mostly when you want to tell people, you tell them, "Oh, my dad has a policy. Nobody comes late to his house. Nobody comes beyond 9 p.m. to his house." So it means that house has a policy. He has a rule that is guiding the the functionality of that home. And the same thing is what so is I'm just painting this picture so you get to understand when you hear policy. It might seem like a big word, but it's something relatable. I think it's basically like what you practice every day. Um, Policy is just like where you tell people, I have this is where I like to do my things. This is how I want to structure my things, or this is how I'm going to be doing things moving forward. So it means you actually set a policy for yourself that this is what is going. These are the guidelines that will guide my the guideline are more like ethics that's going to guide my affairs, that will guide my endeavors, and you stick by it. So same thing applies when you hear policy. But of course, we're talking about public policy. So now we're looking at a larger audience, policy that has to do with the public. So today, first, our learning objective. At the end of this, we expect that participants would have basic knowledge of public policy, understand the process of making policies and its components, explore various types of public policies and the implications, be able to identify the factors influencing public policy decisions, be able to highlight the challenges and ethical considerations associated with public policy, be able to analyze case studies and examples from practical application, then they emphasize the importance of continuous learning in the field of public policy. A table of contents. I'm sure if you can see the screen is there. I don't have to read it out. If you pay attention to the screen, it's just showing you the things we'll be taking today. So next, let's move into policy. What are policies? Like I said, a policy is an outline. A policy outline what government or organization wants to achieve. Earlier I mentioned how you set a goal for yourself, maybe, or you probably in your house you have a rule or a regulation that guides you to get. So mostly it's like a principle to get that guides how an organization or how government wants to do things, or a method or the principle they use to achieve certain things. So it's more like government set a goal and an objective. So how they achieve that goal is where policy comes in. So it's through policy that you get to achieve those goals and provide solution to it. So mostly policies are usually in forms of law, regulations, procedures, administrative actions, incentives, or practices of government and other institutions. Next slide, please. I'm not seeing the screen. So I don't know. I just let me hope she's done that. So why do we make policies? So the idea of making policy is that, no, I said earlier, we need to have certain guidelines and certain procedure and processes to how we do things. So imagine we want to address a certain issue, or we want to determine or decide how something should go, or make a decision. We need to have certain measures in place on how to achieve those things, and that's the reason why we need to make policies to address them. So it serves as a guiding statement or principles used for making decisions. It's created to ensure that, especially let's say for an organization, it's created to ensure that that organization is operating in a manner that aligns with its values or goal, or it could be a tool they use to solve certain problems in that organization. So for government bodies, it's like a framework or like a plan they use, like I mentioned earlier, to use to provide solutions to public issues and how they can achieve certain societal goals. It could also be a roadmap or direction on how allocation can be shared, how we establish certain regulations or laws guiding certain actions or certain behaviors in the society, and also how we provide services to pressing issues. It could be social, cultural, environmental, and not general economic issues. Mostly who make policies. Policies are made, the people that make policies are called policy makers, and this is applicable. The way you apply this is different in based on the sector you are, but it could be, if let's say if you're a board of member, a decision making body, once you're a part of decision making body that gets a certain space, maybe certain environment, a community, um we call them stakeholders. We still get to that point. It's maybe a community, or you're in an organization, a parastatal, and you're part of people that make policies or make decisions there. You are a policymaker within that environment. So let's say now you have your class now, and at the end of your class decide to have an alumni group, and you have, let's say, like an executive team of maybe 4 or 5 people that you assigned, you appointed to lead the team. Those people now form the group that makes the policy. So it means there'll be like your spokesperson. They'll be the one people will have interface with when they want to reach out to your group. They'll also be the one that go to represent you in terms of any activities or any engagements that has to do with you. There'll be the same person. Maybe there's a certain challenge you all have within your team, and you want the management of we inspire greatness to address it. These are the people that will go to address this, or that would present your issues, and they will deliberate with them to see, okay, these are the issues our members are going through. How do we provide solutions? So you see, when I mention stakeholders, the group of people that make that decision. So it means they and your people from that end, from your end, and the management of the organization would make this. So that group constitutes policymakers, because they decide on how to provide solution. It means you've given them the authority, you trust them to make decisions for you. You've given them your power and the mandate to say, yes, we trust your judgment. Maybe it could be based on maybe their experience, or their in a certain maybe in certain field, or it could be on some skills they have that you consider, yes, these people are good enough. So more like how we have public office holder, or we have I mentioned earlier, board of trustees of an organization. That's the executive members, or the highest level, probably highest level officers of organizations. You get, or highest ranking staff. You have them go to meet. Same way you have them, let's say, for government now. So I'm trying to relate it back to government so you understand who your policymakers are. So let's say the way you assign, you vote, you have your representatives, they go there, they go to make laws for you, they speak on your behalf, they present your case in your community to your government to say this is what our people are going through. So those are policy makers. Next, we'll move on to policy and lawmaking. It's important for us to understand the difference between policy and lawmaking, because there's just a thin line between them. I'm sure we hear about policy, we hear about lawmaking a lot. It's just a thin line, so it's important to understand, and at the same time, they're sort of intertwined. There's the connection between them. The other day, I was told you took a class on motion and, okay, we're not taking the one on bills. Motion and bills, of course, by now I'm sure you understand that is actually tied to lawmaking, which is what you see people at the National Assembly or our legislative. That's the legislative. No, we have the three arms of government: That's the legislative part. That is what they handle, law making. Well, mostly usually the executive. So the executive is the government, the president and his cabinet members, his ministers. Sorry, yeah, his ministers and all. If it's at the state level, you have the governor and his commissioners and all. Right? Do you get it? Then we have in the state level we have the House of Representatives, State House of Representatives. So those are the ones that make the law. So laws the standard procedures and principles that must be followed. So it means these are principles, or these are rules that guides how we do things, that creates law, that maintains order in a society. These are tools, these are instruments we use to guide our behavior, in the society. So because imagine we have a society where there's no law and everybody can behave the way they are. You can go and steal, there's no consequences to get. So when there's no consequences, it's definitely and what we call anarchy would abound, because people just begin to do things how they like. People behave the way they like. There's no order. Everybody can just, and it's going to cause chaos. So when there causes chaos, there'll be anarchy. And when there's anarchy, it means citizens are taking action. There's chaos, taking laws into their hands. Nobody can call anybody to order again. Everybody is just doing what they didn't fix because they feel they can always act. So that is why we have laws in society that guides our endeavors, that guides our interaction, that guides how we behave, how we interact with ourselves, how we interact with the government. So and that's, you see, those laws, they must be followed. We don't create laws to say no, we have a law. So when you have law, that's why they tell you law is blind, because the idea of law is blind is, that sign you see for this judiciary. So I'm trying to remember. Is it Lady Justice they call her?
Lady Justice, yeah.
Yes, Lady Justice, thank you very much. If you notice that statue, she's holding a sword, then she has a blindfold. So it means I'm not seeing anybody. I don't even want to see you. I don't want to know what you are. I'm actually assigned to do my job. So it means, you see that sword, if you wrong me, I'm going to use it to cut you, to just teach you a lesson. So I'm not here. I don't want to know who you are, and that's why we have the laws in a society are not meant to favor anyone. They are set, they are put in place, like I said, to check our excesses and to create balance in the society. That's why we have laws in place. So imagine we're in a society whereby everybody can act accordingly, and we have the law. Yet law can actually guide when people do wrong. They know that yes, if I do this thing, there are consequences for it, and I'll pay for it. Imagine we have a better society because people will begin to act well. Do you get? Even some of the so-called leaders that behave so rationally, that do things that are so irregular, different anomalies, like embezzling of money here and there. Some are not even, some don't even they don't even do what do you call it, what they expect to do in the society. Because why? Because they have an obligation. There's a law that guides. That's why we have, let's say, the general. I don't want to go deep so you understand. Do you get? So like in Nigeria now, there's something that guides. If you know, there's something that guides even our existence as an issue. We just didn't just come to being and say no, we're existing. I know as we move along, as we advance your knowledge in this, you get to understand how important it is to have laws in a society. Because even Nigeria as a whole, there's like a body of, do you get? There's like a body of procedure, principles that binds us together, which we follow through. Do you get? When we are, that's why we have a constitution. In advanced time, it's called the ground norm. Okay, this is the principle that guides all of us. This is how we form this country. This is how resources should be allocated. This is what we should get. This is how government should tackle certain things. Then we have so now, like I said, what is the difference between policy and lawmaking? A policy document is not law, but it's just that it helps you identify laws that needs to achieve its goals. So as let me what we have here. Policy sets the goals and plan activities of a ministry and department, but it may be necessary to pass a law to enable government to put things in place. So it serves as a framework, like I said earlier. It serves like a framework for government to achieve certain things. So let's say um, government need to address a particular problem. They would, of course, if they want to address the problem, like I said, it's a law, it's a regulation, or you created the process at which you want to do it. But because you need to make it legitimate, you need to make it so important that people see the essence of following it. Because no, really, it's just a policy. People are not really, there's nothing binding on anybody. Because there's no consequences for you. You've not defined it that there's a consequence for people not following the policy. But because you need that policy, you need it to be authentic, you need it to be legitimate, you want the people to take it very important and you want them to respect it, then it has to go through the process of maybe having it backed by law. Do you understand? So you have your law backing those policies, and with that we know that okay, this is the concrete document. It gets the policy document. Once we will still get to the stage where we pass this policy making process. You get, and how some of these laws are being made. So once that's why you see that once government say we want to do this, it has to pass through the it has to pass through the legislature. Like I said, I mentioned earlier that we have the executive, we have the legislative, we have the judiciary. Executive really should make the policy. It means the governments are able to detect what's the problem, how they want to solve it. So how after they've gone through the process of making a policy, then they take it through the legislature. There will be the people, the set of people that would review it, that will authenticate it and ensure that it is being passed, because that's their job as parliament, to make laws. So it's being passed, it's being made, it's being passed as a law. Then after, of course, once it gets through that stage, it gets through some processes. After those stages, then it gets at that stage is also where you see we get public opinion, because you also have a say in this. You have a say in your policy. So before they get into the law part, they call you in, as a citizen, you give your input. Then once it gets to the stage where they feel this is okay to be adopted, then they pass it into a law. So that law is what is abiding. And that's where we have issue of motions and bills and how some of them get become laws. But because I know recently there was before now, I mentioned cultural issue earlier, and I want to set an example there. Before now, we cannot in the southeastern part of Nigeria, women cannot earn property. We do not have property rights there. So recently some people had to make certain moves to see to say that this is a problem that needs to be solved. You get, so at that level, that is they want government to create a policy to say no, this thing needs to stop. Then you get the legislative will now back it up by law to say yes, this is binding on everybody. Not like I make a policy now tell me it doesn't suit me, I don't want to use it. No, at that stage, it means that is a law that is binding on everybody, and you have to accept it. Then it now means that once you now break that law, then you have judiciary, which is the third arm that will now handle the part of the consequences and look into what can be done when you don't follow these laws. How can they address it? What would be your punishment for that? For me, probably for not following or abiding by that law, or for breaking that law. That's where the judiciary comes in. Next, we have understanding public policy. So public policy itself, now we talk about policies, we related it to the individual level, organizations, to get how they set policies and all. But now let's look at public policy, which is the core of what we want to talk about today. Public policy is the decision and actions that are taken by governments, like I said earlier, to address public issue. So it could be social issue, it could be economical issue, it could be political issue, but there are, you get, there are actions government take, there are processes government follow to ensure that when there's a gap somewhere, it needs to be filled. We need to provide a solution. So it's more like we make a plan, like I mentioned framework earlier, like the plan government has. So let's say, oh, you have, let's say, your project coming up now, right? You need to decide how do you want to do it. Okay, but even though that has to do with an individual, but imagine it's a general thing you all have to do. You have to make a decision. You have to decide what action are we taking, how are we achieving this. At that level, you're also practicing. Yes, you're creating policies that would guide how your group operates. So the idea, there's always, mostly for public, but there's always a goal you want to achieve with it, and the overall objective of this is to ensure that the overall well-being of the society is taken care of, the welfare of the people, just to ensure the betterment of the society. That's the overarching goal of having public policy. I know I mentioned earlier, we have policy makers, and policy makers are mostly elected officials, in governments, people we give our trust to because we trust them to go make decisions on our behalf, and we trust that they will deliver. So we give them our, no, and I'm sure you hear people talk about when they tell you give people their mandate to give them the power to go act on your behalf. So understanding public policy is something that affects every aspect of our lives, because one of the core activities of government is to make policies. Like I said, policies that affect your life, could be social, cultural, like we mentioned earlier, and it's a very important aspect of government activities. We can have health policy, tech policy. I'm sure you've heard it, social policy, mental health policy. So, like I said, it addresses, so for every sector you want to address, there's a policy in that regard, transportation policy. Just recently, there was something about styrofoam, a policy that was passed in Lagos just to address climate change issue, because they do not decompose easily and they mostly clog waterways and all. And um, it's been said that they're actually pose a danger to the environment. So because of that, the government said no, this is an environmental issue. We need to stop this, and that way they had to place a ban on it. So that's the policy by the government to address environmental issue and stop the use of styrofoam. I'm sure you know styrofoam, those soft, very colorful, multicolored packaging we use to get food. It's always, I think it's not really rubber like, yeah, it's more like a foam. Yes, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's like a paper, so to say. So it also
Yes,
helps.
I'm going to say the most common one is the takeaway packs when we go for parties.
Yeah, it's not the
Yeah,
plastic one that has cover.
you know
You
the
get that?
plastic one, the green one that has green, yellow, different colors, pink. Yeah, that's
Colored.
an
It looks it's like foam like this, and that
yeah.
type is what I'm talking about. Yes, thank you. So also, now I mentioned earlier that even individuals, you get, it also helps individuals and also organizations, help them manage the complexities, you get, of governance, and also advocates for change effectively. So it means that if there's a problem in your society, individuals can come together to say there's a problem here, we need to have this solved. The next thing they do is, okay, how can we solve it? It's not our job to make policy in an environment, it's the government policy to make, it's the government's job to make policies. So with that, they put themselves together, they approach the necessary officials or necessary people that would work together with them. And also this can be done maybe through advocacy and other forms. We'll also get to that later. What are the scopes and domain of public policy? I mentioned a wide range of area where public policy applies. It could be healthcare, it could be education, economy, culture, environment, social welfare. Basically, like I said, everything in the aspect of society that affects the well-being and the betterment and the progress of a society, of an environment, of society, or of a nation. These are things public policy seeks to address. What are the key actors in public policy processes? We have, no, I mentioned we have government officials, we have legislators, Interest group, that's where you fall. Interest groups, maybe women groups, community-based organizations, advocacy organizations like NGO. You see, I'm sure you know a lot of these NGO. They do a lot of work around policies, trying to nudge the government to tell them this is where you should act, calling their attention to issues, matters arising where they think they need to act. Governments need to provide certain solutions to certain things. They need to create maybe certain laws that stop, let's say, FGM, female genital mutilation, for example. It's a cultural issue. So it means that if we have to stop it, you and I cannot necessarily just stop it because we need a law. We need something strong that can make people stop it. The only way we can do this is just to have a law that binds it so that anybody that does it knows that there's a consequence for it and they will pay, they'll be liable and they'll pay daily for it. So that way we can have group of people we get come together like interest group that could work together with NGOs. We are seeing that already. A lot of NGOs work around female genital mutilation. They've been clamoring for it, to get and all. So at the end of the day, it means that if that law is passed, but anybody that's probably caught doing that or circumcising their girls and all would face the wrath of the law. Next, we have role of government in public policy. Of course, government play a critical role in how they shape policy, in the kind of policy they shape, in how they execute and implement it, because this is one of the core of their job. Yeah, they also have the mandate to make this law and also ensure that they, I mentioned earlier, they enforce the law. We talk about how different arms of government carry out their duties, talking about legislative, executive, and judiciary. Also, public policy help us allocate resources. Through policy, we know how to allocate it, so we can decide to say, okay, this is how we want to be giving resources to certain people. Like in Nigeria now, I know there are certain states in Nigeria that gets more allocation. Why? Because the main resources that generates revenue is actually domiciled or located around their region. So with that, because it's actually within their region, they are entitled to certain quota, maybe more than others, because they are produced. So imagine they say no, you want to use this alone. So because of that, there's a consideration that was made that these people get certain, so they can also use that to address some other challenges for their people, and also that ensure that and those resources go around. So you see, there's a policy in that regard that allows them you get and probably get more allocation than others. You can also create policy on issue of maybe let's say education. Okay, girls are not going to school. Why are they not going to school? Let's look at the reason why they're not going to school and let's create policy to address these things. So later, I think we'll probably have for me to know your understanding of this. We'll probably have like a brainstorming session to just hear from you and let's see what you understand from this process, the policy making process. So first, we have agenda setting, we have policy formulation, we have policy adoption, the implementation, the evaluation, and support and maintenance. So first, when you want to have, okay, sorry, go next to the policy wheel, let them see that, and I'll come back. I wish I could have that side by side, but I will just interchange between the two. So if you notice, there's a wheel in the next slide, right? So we can call it policy cycle, or you call it policy wheel. That's the process through which we make policy. That's the flow. So first, please back to the policy making slide, then we'll come back. Let me explain the first one, then we can come back to this cycle so you'll be able to understand how the cycle works better. The public policy making process. First, we have agenda setting. Agenda setting is where you, like I said earlier, you identify that there's a problem somewhere, or there's action that government needs to take in certain regards to address certain things, or they need to prioritize certain issues. Especially probably comes as a matter of urgency or as a matter of as a matter of importance, that thing needs to be addressed. Then you set an agenda to say, okay, this is what you want to pursue. I mentioned earlier about I think I made an example of the styrofoam earlier. So the moment government realized, oh, this is becoming a problem, it's becoming an environmental challenge. We need to tackle this. Yeah. So that way, from that level now, you have the moment government decides that, they begin to look at what's the next thing to do. We have defined this problem now, and just know that even at that level, this is something that affects public. It affects different people, tickets. It affects maybe even politics are always coming. So at the time you're setting agenda, you put that in mind. Then next, you define. So part of what do you call it? Agenda setting, also defining what you want to achieve. How do I want this thing to go? Okay, so let's say I want to create a policy on addressing, let's say, um, farmer header crisis, for example. Yes, I think it's something very relatable. Let me use that. So it means that one of the reasons why, what's the problem here? Farmer headers are having crisis, right? All the time. How can we resolve farmer header crisis? How? Okay, we define the fact that, well, then we'll have to define the fact that there's a problem and we need to create a solution. What's the problem? There's a crisis. What can we do to resolve this crisis? It means we probably have to find a way to stop, what do you call it, these two people from clashing. Why were they clashing in the first place? It's usually issue of grazing or low grazing. You entered my farm unlawfully, and or without consent. You destroy my crop. Because of that, probably you retaliate with maybe attacking the animal, the owner of the animal too. And because they're two different, they don't even understand. They both don't even understand and understand themselves. Everybody's are just after, because at the end of the day, human beings are very particular about themselves first. So everybody's bothered about how this thing affects me. So at that level, everybody wants it. So imagine what I said earlier, there was no law, and we allow people just continue to take actions into their hands. You can do anything you like. You need someone hit you, you can decide to curse the person, you can shoot the person. Imagine that. So we decided, okay, there's a problem that needs to be solved here. Then next, we decide, okay, the policy formulation. So this is where we begin to make the proposals to address that problem. Let's say the proposal to address farmer header crisis. So that's where we begin to conduct research, we gather input from stakeholders, we draft laws, and regulation, we do data analysis, research and all that. A lot of work at that. That's where you have the most part of the work, like the rigor at that level is actually it's very crucial, because you need to take your time to get to actually ensure that you're addressing the real problem. You have enough data to back what you're doing. You're not just creating policy over the top of your head or out of the blues. You're creating, or you're getting something, or maybe so that you don't go and achieve a solution that does not even address the problem you're trying to tackle in the first place. So this is where the rigor of the work is. You need to do a lot of work in that aspect. And it's still at that level that once you gather your evidences, you gather your research, you put them together, and then you cannot begin to say, okay, let's propose a motion. Or let's say if it was probably just something that the government executive can just pronounce directly without necessarily going through, just see them make a pronouncement that, okay, we we want to, okay, let's say naira design policy. I'm also going to come back to that. The way we just government just decided, okay, we want to design naira to tackle certain irregularities. That was towards the, although the reason that was put out there for the naira redesign policy was completely different from what the people experienced. That the naira, they wanted the naira design policy, and it means they're going to take out what do you call it, all the whole currency, and introduce a new one, and that way is also going to curb corruption, and also help us it will also be a way to check issues of maybe people that stash money somewhere, and of course it means over time you'll bring it out, and we're able to nab people to get over time that's been stealing from the coffers of the government. And that way it can also help us regulate inflation and the rest. Then it comes again to we come back to drafting legislations. So at that level again, there will be there could be legislations that will be drafted. You get okay, like I talk about back to what you call a farmer elder crisis. So when someone, let's just say someone can decide, okay, let's create a policy. Do you get a policy and sort of a law that address these things. So once you've done your research on why is this happening, what can be done about it, how can we formulate these policies? Then next you move on to say, okay, let's craft a legislation for it. You've created the okay, now you have your problem, you identified it, you cannot have a draft. Probably let's say we have a bill or a motion to address the issue. Then at that level too, you also do a lot of stakeholders engagement because you need to get the buy-in of the people. Like I said, the people still have a say. The people that these things are affecting needs to also contribute. You need to hear from them. Let's say the fact that there's a farmer header crisis in Kaduna does not mean I probably might not be dead, even if I have the knowledge of policy making. So it means you're now calling the people affected. How is this thing affecting you? So that process will also guide and inform some of the decisions you'll be making. Next, we have policy adoption. So at that level of policy formulations, it goes through certain process. That's why they tell you it goes through, especially in the National Assembly, it goes through certain readings. Some will have the first, second, third reading. That's at the B level. Once you get to what you call lawmaking, they'll take you more on that. Then you can now move on to you get to becoming a law after probably after the third reading, then it moves on to the presidential assent, then it becomes a law. And what is the law we're passing? Maybe what, like I said, we're trying to address permanent crisis. It means that the only way we can achieve this is to have a ranch. Now, once you have a ranch, nobody is going to anybody's farmland. And you know that if you pass that policy, it's not enough to just say, okay, we've created a policy, even though we've thought it through and it actually addresses our students. So you need that person. Thank you. So at that level, we at the level of where it's passed through it has gone past the what do you call it, the three stages. Then it moves on to the presidential accent. Once the president can assent to it, then it becomes a law. Then we have a law that yes, nobody is going to go into anybody's farm. If you have a cattle, go and take it to a ranch. So you get, so that way we're not having clash. Nobody's trespassing on anybody's land, and there will be peace. So you see why it is good to have policies and laws in place because it guides a lot of things. It mitigates against so many challenges. So when you have good policies in place, you realize that it mitigates against so many challenges or issues you should have in society. Like I said, it's like a guiding principle to get on how we make decisions on different issues in the society. Then next you move on to policy adoption. So for policy adoption, that is where we get approval. I mentioned earlier it could be, it depends. If it's probably within a group of people, you can just vote. If it's probably in a larger society, you can have a referendum where we all come together to say, okay, this is we the people, this is what we want. It could, like I said, it could be the legislative, we're passing, want to make a law about something. Or it could just be, again, a government policy or a government pronouncement, like I talked about the styrofoam earlier, that says, okay, this is a problem, this has to go. We need to stop this. That was what brought about the issue of the styrofoam. Then policy implementation. After this whole process, then we get to the point where you see that law we created, the policy, we now need to implement it. It is when we need to execute it to ensure that we are putting it to good use and it's having impact. It's providing solutions to the reason why we even put it in place, and it's also addressing the issue at hand we had wanted it to tackle. And that is very key. Because sometimes, we have policies and people are asking, why is it that this policy is not working? Because it's not being implemented. Like I said about styrofoam now. We've mentioned that, okay, let's ban styrofoam. Government has made that pronouncement. They set up a policy that they are banning styrofoam. And it comes to implementation. Then nobody's doing anything about it. Government did not assign it. There's nobody watching or monitoring whether people are still using it. We don't even know how many people are still using it. You know what? That's where data comes in. With data, you know that, okay, before, if the probably market, the purchasing, you get rate of styrofoam before was about 50, so it means that, if it has dropped to like maybe 30%, it means people are not buying. Then you can buy it anymore. You can say that implementation has begun because the government has started taking action. Action could now mean that they are sanctioning people. Do you get? There will be consequences. You see where law also come into place. The consequences for you doing this. If you do not, you face the wrath of the law because government has decided. That's what I said earlier. Law is what guides to get, like the backing you give to the policy to ensure its legitimacy and its essence, its importance, and ensure that it actually sees results as a thing that it brings results. That's where you see people now. That's where you see that, yes, people are being people are being prosecuted for doing certain things. They broke the law or they did not follow the policy. Then there will be consequences for it, or they'll have to bear certain charges for it. Okay, this also applies in terms of allocation of resources. Like I mentioned earlier, with the policy in place that this has to be done. Maybe some people needs to be allocated certain resources. Let's say we have a policy to say we need one woman in government. It now means that at this level we decide once women in government, and we decide the best way to do is to give quota system. At the implementation level is where we begin to say that, okay, women, we are getting more women. Not like you said, you make the pronouncement and we're not seeing anything. It's not being implemented. We're not seeing the impact. We're not seeing we're not seeing more women. But yes, we have a policy. Then policy evaluation. This is where you assess the effectiveness and the impact of the policies that has been implemented. This it helps policymakers identify what's working, what is not working, and what you need to improve. So normally with policy, you always need to go back and that's why you have a monitoring. It's like it's a circle, it's a work in progress. If you look at that circle I showed you earlier, it's a work in progress and it's a continuum, it's something that keeps going on and on. It's a circle that we come back to and repeat. So because of that, you always have to need to review, to check, to see how it's going, how it is working. At this level, it's actually not always a bad idea that if you see that the policy, you can always at this point take back or retract your policy if it's not addressing the issue. So it means you now go back again to this process to say where did I miss it wrong? It could be at the point of the agenda setting. It could be the policy formulation, maybe when you're doing research and consultation, that you miss something or you did not do something well. Hence, it's not giving you the results you need. So it's very critical to evaluate your policy. And today I'm going to make an example. Now I'm going to make an example of two policies we have currently, talking about the economic situation in the country. We have the subsidy removal. We have the sorry, how did this skip my head just now? We have the policy removal, and we have the FX the FX subsidy removal too, and the crude subsidy removal. These are two heavy policies that come in at the same time. We know that we need to stop paying policy subsidies because if you look at it at the long run, it doesn't really pay tickets. It doesn't really pay us that we're using our own resources that we're supposed to manage, we can manage. You get, let's say for crude oil, we're importing something that we can easily produce here. Then we'll now still pay money to subsidize so that people can afford this. When all we can do is just have refineries here, we have the resources, and we can just produce it ourselves. All the forex now that whereby we are actually, because of course over time the value of naira has been battered, so to say, has dropped so bad that again inflation has increased the value. We don't Our money does not really have a substantial value anymore, then you get, so the exchange rate between the naira and dollar, the why is so gap, then you feel the need to subsidize for the people so that people do not feel the hardship. So it's another money that's supposed to go somewhere else for using. Whereas if we had probably had, if we're producing, let's say, crude, we're generating our own income here, we had other source of revenue generation. Let's talk about, maybe let's say, production now, where we're producing so much. Let's say agriculture. See all the resources we have in Nigeria. Imagine we're using them and utilizing them well, and we can actually generate lots of resources. There's really so much. There's really so much, do you get, we will achieve from that. There's just so many. We have abundance of resources, do you get, that can actually generate revenue if only you get. And again, this is also a policy issue. We have policies in place that needs to address what are our economic challenges. Why are we even here? So it means that we are probably, there's something we're not even getting right, even in terms of like in terms of our economic issues. It means we're not getting it right. That's also another policy issue on it to get on its own. If we probably go back to the drawing board to say, what, how did we get it wrong? What did we get? How did we get here? Then we can begin to say, okay, this is the part where we need to work hard, and we need to begin to create other means because of our overtly dependence on oil. We completely forgot that get we have other means whereby we could generate revenue in the country. Then, like I said, at that point, you also look what needs to work, what needs to improve. And that was the reason why you see that I mentioned the Naira and the fuel subsidy and the FX forex subsidy, because these two policies are coming at the same. They are two heavy policies. Normally, when you're adopting policies like that, you look at it. What is the consequences on the people? Because it's actually the people that's affecting. At this level, you probably expect that governments will probably hold on to one, find a solution first as we're going, then you come back and take the other, because they're two heavy policies, and it is really dealing a heavy blow on the people. That is why we're having serious challenges. If the FX you get the FX policy is there, and the first for subsidy at the same time. So it means that you get, of course, inflation will increase, prices of things will go so high, and that's why we are where we are today. That people are actually complaining. So you probably, at this point, you probably expect the government to probably retrace the step and say, okay, let's hold on to one piece. Let's find a solution to augment some of the problems. Then or in some cases, let me say with these policies, in some places when something like this come in place, which is another policy, they sort of give palliatives to the people. But again, in our own country, things just don't. We don't do things like normal people do, which is a problem. Then next, so at that process, we need to also check, like I said, does it need improvement? Do we need to review it? Do you get? That's where we begin to evaluate. So it's, like I said, it's not a bad idea if you retract your policy at that point to say no, this is not working. We need to go back and look into it and see how we can make it work. Then the last, support and maintenance. So this is mostly for, let's say, crisis response, feedback, and updates. But this allows it provides for additional support and for continuation, and also that this we can also allow terminate policy, because at times a policy might be there, you think it's good, but it might probably just come out redundant at the point. It means that redundant more like it's not even, maybe it's not maybe it was useful at the point to address something, or probably it's not even serving purpose anymore, or probably it's not effective anymore. We need to retract it, and we need to probably work on it and present it again, or take it out completely. Or you also check that has it accomplished its goal. That's how you know if your policy has worked. Now that brings me to the policy circle. So if you notice what we talked about earlier, see the first one, it says issue identification and definition. That's where you are setting your agenda. Then you move on to data research and analysis for policy making. That's under policy formulation as well. You see, it's linked to number 3. Policy formulation, you do your research. If it's something that has to do with the law, you do your drafting. You have your, say, regulation. You want to call for regulation. let's say it has to be regulation of, there was this issue about fake products, and let's say NAFDAC now wants to create you get a regulation, identify that there's a problem, then they've done the research to see this is where you get these things are happening. These are the states that are most affected. These are the people. You get this is how the policy. This is how the problem. Define the problem statement. Say this is how the problem is affecting the people. How can we tackle it? They've done their. Then they'll go to do their research. Do you get? Then at this level, they could say, okay, we want to create a regulation or want to create a legislation for it. Then also consultation. I talk about stakeholder management, how you get people. This is also where you bring in experts. It's always key when you're doing things like this to bring in experts to help you look at it to say yes, what you're doing, you're in the right track. We're evolving, we're growing, things are changing, practices are changing, models of doing things are changing. Get especially in advanced country where which is where we usually learn best global practices of doing things. So you need to consult with people so that they can actually look through it and help you assess it using their own expertise and intellectual lens to see if it's something that is something that is that's relevant and that will be applicable or that would work, or there's something you need to. So like I said, you don't miss what you want to achieve with the policy. Next, you have policy adoption, like I mentioned earlier. That is when, okay, we all feel like it's actually good to go, then we can actually use it. We've done our homework on it, then we can adopt it, then we begin to implement. Yeah, that's where we begin to implement it. We're executing it, we're applying it to where it needs to be applied, or we're seeing results. Then, okay, monitoring evaluation, like I mentioned earlier. So, types of public policy. Next, we have regulatory policy, we have distributive policy, we have the redistributive policy, then we have the constituent service policies. So, the regulatory policy is aimed at controlling and influencing behaviors through laws and regulation. This is where example of that styrofoam comes in. That environmental regulation or policy pronouncement that was made. This is where issue of NAFDAC, like I mentioned earlier, comes in with the fake and counterfeit drugs, like I mentioned earlier. So these are law, the safety law to say no, people will not use get pedestrians should always use the pedestrian lane so that you get avoid accidents when they cross maybe highways. You get this is where that comes in. Then we have distributive policy. Distributive policies involve allocation of resources or certain benefits to certain groups or certain regions. It could be in terms of funding, could be in terms of infrastructure. So we could say, okay, Lagos Ibadan needs a rail. Do you get maybe the East needs a port? Do you get So these are ways we actually distribute resources and allocate resources in society so that it go round and we can have equitable distribution and it's balanced and nobody is feeling marginalized, because this is also a big issue. Nobody's feeling cheated, nobody's feeling there's not enough infrastructure. Maybe you're the governor now, it's only the people in your constituency that you think, constituency where you come from, that you keep building their roads. No, you need to ensure that you get your policies are targeted at ensuring that if I want to have primary healthcare in the state, the primary healthcare center needs to cost across, if I have 27 local governments, all 27 local governments. I'm not saying because in one local government I don't like their faces there, or probably in that local government they did not vote me during the election. So because of that, I'm not going to go. No. It is your job as an elected official of the people, you get as the chief executive officer of the state, to ensure that you create a balance and you ensure that the well-being or welfare of everybody is taken care of. Then distributive policies. This involves transferring of resources from one group to another to reduce inequality. Thank you. I just mentioned that. Example is support for low. That's where you have maybe social welfare program, social protection program for the people. You have palliatives, like I mentioned earlier. You have maybe, let's say, you want to create something on maybe subsidy for period for young girls so that um, girls in low income area, so they can, that could be a policy so that they can afford it. or we want to say, okay, like the what's that empower program to tackle that we had in the last administration, trader money, for market to women, empower for young people. These are just policies that seek to fill certain development gaps in society. Then we have constituent service policies. So this involve providing assistance and support to individual constituents. It may include helping with resolving issues, government agency providing information or government programs. So let's say government creates a program now to tackle peace building issue, to tackle peace building, maybe an issue between certain communities. This is where this comes in. Next factor that can influence public policy. We have different factors. Please, if you have any question, I think you should at this stage. I would like you to note them. Just keep writing your questions if you have any questions. I would like to take the whole slide, then we'll come back to question and answer. Please, just if you have any question, note it so you don't forget it, please. Um, Factors that can influence public policy, political factors such as balance of power, partisan politics. No, it's APC today, it's PDP tomorrow. PDP makes a policy, APC comes tomorrow, doesn't care regardless of whether it's working or not. APC kicks it out, say no, because we are not the one, we are not the initiator, we are not the custodian of this. It's not going to work, and that thing affects policy so much because it could always take us back. So imagine there's a policy now, we're already making progress, is doing that policy is doing well. Then you come and say because it is not your party, they weren't the one in power. So because of that, you weren't there when they created. So it has to be the policy has to be cancelled because it's not something that you get that you key or align with. Also, like I said, it influence general public. So it means with that now, it affects the public generally because maybe it's something the public has been enjoying. Then you come, you say, no, I don't want this product anymore, regardless of its benefits. No, it takes us back because we're already progressing. We're talking about development, and I don't. For me, I really don't know why someone should implement a policy. Then you're coming back, you're taking us back to say because that policy. You're supposed to. Your job is supposed to come in and say, okay, this is working. Or how is it working? You build upon what has been done. You can always make it better. Make it better. See how you can make it better and let it work for the people. But we're not coming to say no. I'm not going to. This policy has to be retracted. It has to be cancelled because I did not create the policy. Because that's not a progressive mindset, so to say. Economic factors such as inflation. Thank you. I talked about inflation earlier. Unemployment, budget constraints. So probably, like I said, we're talking about allocation of resources earlier. So maybe because you want to handle certain things, but because you don't have enough budget, you cannot address it. So the policy cannot really be fully implemented because probably their funding concerns for it. It also affect your economic growth. So probably, I mentioned something earlier. Maybe it's the certain policies that is affecting, maybe that affects the economic issue and probably how we do businesses. Then you come and say no, this is not working. Imagine a naira design policy now. That policy in the first place wasn't even meant to be. There was no need for that policy at that point. And that policy just literally had, it had so many negative effects on us because I could imagine how it affected the people, economic activities at that time. So that's why you need to also think through your policy. It was bringing experts. Look at the implication of your policies because you're creating them. Because the policy you get, any policy, the same way policy can actually give you good results. Some policies might not necessarily will not give the result you want, and in turn, they might even get create more problems for you in the society. Social factors such as demographic trends, cultural norms. I mentioned something about FGM earlier. Mhm. Public opinion can influence prioritization of issues and design of policies. So if FGM is an issue now, we're all talking about it. Do you get? But you go to some places, they'll tell you no. Some places are still practicing it because they feel this is what is best. So it means you have to take your time to see how you can get. As you're trying to create that policy, you need to design a policy. As you create a policy, you liaise, you interact with them, you engage with them to know how you get you are able to provide solution. Let them be part of it, part of the process, so that they can own it and they can relate with it when you eventually make it a policy. Next, we have technological factor. IT now is the new oil, so people, so to say, create there's new opportunities. It also poses its own challenges. The emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, biotechnology. So it means you also have to create different regulatory issues. You also have to create different policies in response to some of these innovations that are coming up, some of these new developments, and see how you can benefit from them or how they affect certain things in your society that you need to tackle. Legal factor include court rulings, existing laws, provide you get framework within policies is always formulated to address these things. So maybe there are some constitutional constraints. Let's say we have the constitution and something in the constitution has said certain things. Then he wants to create a policy you get that stops it. So you meet that. You probably you'll not be able to carry out what you want to just because your constitution says TK has stated certain things. That's why you see at times they call for there's a call for memorandum currently. I think there will be a constitution review. Yes, okay, let's say in the constitution now, women, I don't know if you know, no, women cannot confer citizenship on the husband, Nigerian woman, on the foreign husband. So and this is something that's been at the forefront of issues lately. Women groups have been talking about it, they've been fighting about it to see that because it's discriminatory law. uh, and because of that, it poses a constraint on women. Just recently, before, you as a woman, you cannot go and collect your passport. I've forgotten the name of the woman that actually made the move on that before that law was actually abolished. That women cannot, you have to come with your husband or something. You cannot go as an individual to say, I want to, I want to get my passport. That's an international, talking about national passport. Up to now, as a woman, you cannot go and bail you need a male if you want to go and bail a child, your child. You need your husband a male figure. They will tell you they don't give. I think I had that. So I had that recently. They don't give us give they don't give grant bill that in that regard. So next we have tools and yeah, we're almost done. Just second to the last slide. Tools and instruments of public policy. We talk about different tools and different instruments that are being used in the public policy domain. So we talked about legislation earlier. So that's why you see that at times I could be interchanging policy and talking about law. I told you there's just a thin line. Sometimes they're connected, but just always remember that policy is probably a procedure, a rules or a regulation, a principle that seeks to address certain issue or that guides how people something is being operated. But law is that which actually guides how or backs how that that goal or that policy or the aim of that policy is being achieved or implemented. And it's also what gives him so much legitimacy and stance. And um, legislation involve the enactment of laws by legislative bodies. It could be parliament, talk about Congress. Law provides legal authority for government action and establish the framework of policy implementation. So, like I said, is that backing you have, that authority, that power you have to get. That's where which your policy is built upon, and that is why it actually gives it so much authenticity and legitimacy. Then executive orders are directive issued by executive branch of government to implement or interpret certain existing law or policy or address certain specific issues. So executive order can usually come mostly from the president. Let's say from the president, an executive comes from him. So he could always just say, okay, I give an executive order that this is like a directive. Say there's a problem here, this needs to be addressed, and this is what I think needs to be done. So it's like a pronouncement you make. So government can actually make pronouncements. Like I said, it comes from the executive branch of government, which is the presidency. So it's the president that has the power to give an executive order on something and say, this is how it should, this is I want if today the president said I want maybe five percent of maybe or 35% of appointments to be women. So it means the president has the final say in that regard, and he issues a directive to say this is how I want this to be done. Or probably there's an existing law you can, and you could say, okay, I want it interpreted in another manner to address certain things, and make that such pronouncement. Regulations is what I talked about earlier. This has to do with government agencies. So you see that government is really broad, and policy. So basically, these tools is how different aspects of government, you get how they approach issues and what they use. That's why I talk about tools and instruments they use. So you see that legislation is mostly at the legislative level. That's why you have legislative processes mostly done. That's why congresses, parliament come. You get that's what where they carry out their own function of making laws. Lawmaking. Then you have the executive order, which is that the role of the presidency. Then you have regulations, which is associated with government bodies, government agencies, government parastatals, how they can enforce certain laws, maybe to stop certain behaviors, stop certain practices in the society, or something that's disrupting the society. It's more like it gives like a detailed guideline of this is how things should be done, and also ensures compliance and enforcement to say, okay, today we say that we don't want to get counterfeit products. We're going to be attacking because of the implication on the health of the people. We're going to be attacking. We're banning. There's a law against counterfeit products. It means anybody that's caught again will now face the wrath of the law. That's where they hand over to the judiciary. We set a regulation to say, okay, this is how we should act. We don't want you to do this, but you went against it. Then judiciary comes to they come in there to take action. So they also be the one to ensure compliance to say yes, we cannot. So imagine the other day that they caught all those people, caught people that are making those things. Despite, so if they don't ensure compliance and they keep checking to ensure that people are not making fake products, they will keep making it, and also if you keep putting the public the public in danger. Actually, a health crisis. You could have a health crisis because of that. And that's the thing that they enforce it. Enforcement means even if it's your brother or your sister that is doing it, it has to also face the consequences. So that's where you need to enforce it to ensure that people must do it. Not like I said, when there's no law, people just tend to people always behave how they when there's no guideline, when there's no rule, everybody would want to do what pleases them. So the moment you have these guidelines in place, it means you put people in check. People have their get. People know that there's certain limits they have and certain boundaries in which they can operate. Then we have fiscal policies involve the use of government spending, tax and taxation to influence the economy. Example is budget allocation, tax incentive, you get stimuli package. So it's basically policies we create around how government spend money, how we generate revenue, and also taxes that we collect. How do you manage them and all that? How we taxing be like today now? Probably we have tax has been. Imagine they increase the taxes. How does it affect the people? So these are kind of policies we also have to make, because this is also another aspect of government, and also budget allocation to different parts of the country, so that there could be all around development. Since we operate a system whereby we operate a federal system whereby decision is made at the center. Most the allocations is being shared. What the allocation is being, but sorry, allocation of resources is being decided at the center. So you need to decide how this could look, how different parts of the country get certain resources and what goes to them. It could be based on different criteria. It could be based on probably the size of the population, and maybe probably issues, maybe matters or certain issues they have to tackle, the different things that goes in place when making these decisions. Monetary policies involve regulation of the money supply and interest rate. That is where CBN comes in by central bank. So the major The major function of central bank is to control inflation. I know we call it bankers bank. You manage banking, the banking sector regulation. Then you also ensure that you try to stabilize the economy with the monetary policies you're creating, and, and that way will ensure and will promote economic growth. Some of the monetary policies that was put in place in the last administration is what we are suffering today, like the Naira design policy. It was a policy that was not get. That policy, excuse me, was shouldn't even exist in the first place. That policy just brought problem on people, so you could tell it wasn't even thought through at all. They didn't think through it. It wasn't well thought out. Someone just know that they wanted maybe for personal reason. And that's the thing again. It's called public policy. So if you want to call if you're making a policy for the public, then you have to consider what is the impact on the people. No, that's where you do when you set your agenda. That's where you do your research, detailed research, and get the data on how it affect people. It's not called personal policy. It's called public policy, a guideline ticket, or maybe a decision that affects a large group of people. It's not something that has to do with you alone. So you now imagine how someone implements a policy maybe for just personal reasons. Definitely, it's going to definitely have a detrimental effect on the people, because in the first place, the reason that policy was put in place considered to was never considered in light of how it affects the people, the plight of the people, or the welfare of the people, or how it affects the implication on the people, was never considered in the first place. It was never thought of. It was just that I wanted to create the policies for reason best known to then CBN governor and made the policy. And we all saw the impact of that policy. See how that policy affected us. Just made a decision, and that was it. So we need to be careful about policy, especially CBN. There's certain policies CBN have to make, knowing that you control inflation, we get stabilize the policies you make, you just stabilize the economy. And it's actually a very it's like, I think for me, I think I find that like one of the hearts of the government, because whatever you do has a grave effect on whatever policy you put out, has a grave effect on everybody generally, and anything actually that has to do with economic issues is going to affect every other area. It's bound to have ripple effects. Could even affect the yeah, it could even affect it will affect maybe security. It will affect different things, because when people you have policies now that people you get, if inflation has gone so high, people cannot even afford to buy things anymore. The purchasing power has been reduced. They're not earning so much. Just as someone wants to go into crime, they're having clashes and all that. So, as public policy experts, as public people that will be taking interest in this field, um, if you have to, if it's something you pick interest in, then you have to ensure that you always have to go through the proper channel of doing things. You get, and thank you. You have guide. You have different guide on how to do things. There are layout models on how to do things. There are stages of how to do things. You have to go through them to ensure that you are not missing anything. Because the moment you do it, or you do it for different reason or an ulterior motive, it will bounce back. And because it has to do with the public, when it has to do with the public, trust me, once it fails, it's always a disaster. Then public-private partnership (PPP), I would like that we really like we usually call it, involves collaboration between government agency, private sector, and entities just to achieve a shared goal. Maybe we want to do business together, we want to provide infrastructure, we want to deliver some social services, basically. And lastly, challenges in public policy, complexity of issues. Many public issues are complex. They are multifaceted, making it challenging to develop effective solutions. This is also why we need maybe there's a social aspect to it, there's a cultural aspect to it. So you also need to take your time and see. That's why you need to take your time to see that whatever policy you're making, you're working, it's moving in the right direction, and you're taking into consideration the parameters you get and the right procedure to do things, so you can achieve results. It could be a complex problem sometimes, but it's achievable because you have people. That's why you could also use your knowledge to visit what has been done in other countries. How did they do it? How did they adopt it? You find a way to adopt it. You bring it in and adapt it to suit your own peculiar situation. Stakeholder divergence. Stakeholders often have different interests and priorities. Yes, so here there's always a problem with consensus building. Like I talk about this ranching thing. I think for a very long time it's been a big issue now in Nigeria, whereby you're trying to get the people, the headers that say, okay, these are nomads, they move around, they're saying they're not the one attacking, their heads has to move, they have to move around, they have to, and that's how they feed, that's how they use their normal life. The people are saying they're passing, of course, they're passing through communities, they're stepping on crops, maybe they're eating them. This is just a very complex issue. And you're getting these two sides of it to say, see, this is the solution to this. And they're finding difficult to even reach a consensus and all agree or make it together. So people have different, sometimes people have different interests of things. It's always difficult to bring, and that stakeholder engagement is very key when you're making decision. That's where you do your consultation and get opinion from the people. Because else, like I said, if you still don't consider all those things, it might not really work for the purpose. Might not be behind. It might not work for the purpose you need it for. And if it's not fit for purpose, it defeats the reason why you're doing it. Budget constraint, maybe limited financial resources on the things you want to do. So you're not able to, like I said earlier, maybe there's certain funding required to carry out certain things. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. Question and answer. Although we don't have much time. I wanted us to do like a brainstorming session, but we do not have much time because we even started late. But I'm just going to throw it out there. Let me take a question first. Then I'm going to ask someone just to see that you understand it. I'm going to ask someone, maybe one or two persons, some questions, and I'd like to get their feedback. But before then, let me get your questions.
Thank you very much, Bushra, for that. I mean, extensive lecture on public policy. It's public policy is really important. So, I mean, I learned so many things. As always, I'm always writing. So please, if you have any questions, please direct them to Bushra, or you can drop them in the comment section. Or like I said earlier, you can drop them in the group, and I'll read them out. Mm.
Okay, if there's no question, I think I could always ask my own question. Let's see.
Yes, please do.
Okay, good. So I'd just like to know, just for me to see that at least someone had a good understanding of what's happening. So let's say, for instance, now with what you've learned so far, what would you do if I say, okay, what kind of policies do you think you'll create? What's the one challenge you think we have in Nigeria that needs a policy, and what would you do in respect of what you've learned, and also pursuing those process to tackle the policy? What would you do if you have to provide a policy, maybe say policy directive or a policy document? Which kind of problem would you address, and how would you go about it? I need answer from someone, please. I need answers from someone.
Bushra, can you just repeat the question again? So let's see if they will.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, mention one problem in the society that you think you would address. I've mentioned several different cases when I was speaking. So mention one problem in our society in Nigeria today which you would like to address with a policy, and how would you go about it? Given you could try to apply the policy circle, you can apply the policy circle to it, and tell us how you provide a solution to it using that policy circle model.
Okay. Can I go? Bushra, can I
Okay.
respond to at least a few?
I can respond. It's fine if we don't have. I can understand if we don't have anybody. We need to get people to digest. It's actually it might be a new concept to them, and they
Yeah,
really need to digest it. So what I will do is, by the time I come back for the next class, when we go to move into the policy analysis, policy brief, I will refer to some of these things to ask and say, okay, talking about some of these things, what do you think you can do differently in this regard, or
yeah,
how, or Michelle, when you are even getting to that stage, is some of these things will reflect at that level.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
okay, yeah.
Okay. But if anybody has anything, I mean, there's no wrong or right answer here.
Yeah,
But
you have
I
anything?
mean, I mean, I wanted to use an example. So I was going to
Okay.
say one thing that has really been bothering me right now is something about period poverty, and we can all attest to that as women. It's a critical issue that is affecting us at the moment, right? And the prices of sanitary towels are going really, really high. So, I mean, like you said, you gave us different ways we can pass policies. Well, if I were the president of Nigeria, through an executive order, you can put that all public schools or all government schools should be able to provide sanitary towels for students. I mean, I'm just giving an instance of how policy interventions can come from an executive order. And one thing again is that policy doesn't even stop at government. Bushrah already did us like the dissecting of that, but organizations too can pass policies. So another way that if I was an organization, if I'm trying to ensure that our organization addresses period poverty, one way we can do it is to say in our organization, we always provide sanitary towels for all our staffs in the restrooms. We always would raise awareness to educate staff during our orientations when they are coming in, and we'll also take part in civic responsibility to say that we contribute to organizations that are working on um, to end period poverty. I mean, that's just an instance. So if anybody wants to say something, you can say. I mean, there's no hard, it goes down to if you even want to say all government schools should provide school uniforms. I mean, policy is just the intention, what you need to, what you want to do. So if you want to see a difference in your country, most times it will start with policy because policies are easier as opposed to laws like Bushrah says that will take time to pass first reading, second reading. Yeah.
Thank you, Veronica. And to just add to that, like I mentioned, thank God she mentioned, thankfully she mentioned something like executive order. No, I told you there are different types of policies. Some are easier. Imagine an executive order. It's easier for the president to just pronounce to say, okay, today I want to charge the Ministry of Power to see that Nigerians have at least 8 hours of light or 12 hours of light every day. That's a policy. Then we cannot take it into law too. That was okay. Like she mentioned, period poverty. We can decide, okay, we want to make it a law, to be a bill. We get to go through the stages of bills and all that. We create a bill for it. We get public opinion, go through the public hearing. We get goes through the first, second, third hearing. Then it moves into the presidential assent, and we make it a law that gets. We need to tackle period poverty, and with this, it means we're probably creating, we're just subsidizing this, or we're making a law that every school must have this in their lavatories, something like that. So just not just something, a problem, anything that, like I said, anything that is a problem in the society. It could be that maybe in the front of your house they are throwing dumping refuse. You could decide to say, okay, I want to write, like, that's where policy brief or policy analysis comes in. You could like a policy brief just to call attention of government to say, okay, in this area of policy advisory, to say, okay, this is how, and this is also area, this is how people are managing the environment, and this is what I think needs to be done about it. This is what the government can do, because people stay in the area, you know what the problems are, you know why the people pouring it there, you probably know how they go about it, you know what are the people that should probably be addressed. You give a better context to the problem, then you draw their attention to it to say, okay, in this area people are dumping refuse at a particular location. and is probably creating health issues, it needs to be tackled. Excuse me. So because of that, you call the attention of the government. This is a problem already. Then you call the attention of the problem. We'll get to that later, and you get government can even come in to say, okay, we want, this is a problem. They'll now go further to do research and say, okay, what are the people that's littering the floor? What is the area you get? What's the area like? How is it affecting the people there? Is it causing malaria? Is it exposing them to diseases? As the malaria rate increased, you get over time because of that site where there's open defecation or something. Before you know it, it comes a government creates a population policy to say no, this has to stop. Nobody should do this again, or there's a ban on it. Then it moves to implementation. Implementation means everybody, government is going to enforce it to say we have to, nobody should, anybody that pees here or anybody that openly defecates here or dump reviews here is going to, you guys going to face the consequences. Then you get government can come back after 3 months to review to say, okay, what's it like? Are these people even using it? Is it working? Is it applicable? Or maybe what you said is not even what we should do. What's the result? So basically that's it. And you continue to monitor it and see how it works. So that's it really. It's, let's just allow people, let's allow them digest it. It's a whole lot and it's a new concept they're open to. So
Yeah.
they might need,
Yeah.
yeah, to digest, understand. So the essence of this, thankfully, there's a video. You can always revisit it, watch it again, then learn. There are also resources out there. Use your Google. Like I always say, Google is your friend. You can also read more on it, research more if it's something you would like to know. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bushra. We really appreciate you coming today and, taking our time to speak on public policy. Um, Public policy is something that is really, really critical. And like you stated, it is something that we need. And a lot of times we have had problems with our policy implementation, policy formation in Nigeria. So it's good that as young people, we are aware about how policy is, what the importance of policy and policy formation, because then it helps us in our daily work. We're able to make informed decisions and we're able to contribute positively in our organizations or anywhere we find ourselves. And even as young people, we can be able to charge government, and nudge them into passing policy that is good for women and is good for men and is good for kids, just in general, good for the general public. So thank you very much, Bushra. Like you said, I'm super excited for the next stage. I know we're going to do policy drafting and everything. So you're going to come and give us the whole policy analysis. I want to thank you for coming and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. We appreciate you and we do not take it for granted. We know that it's not easy to take out time to plan. I know you have a really busy schedule, but you had bookmarked this when I first told you I wanted you to come on this and share your wealth. So I thank you very much. And I also want to thank the mentees who have stayed, who have listened to this session. I would urge you to go again, read, and if you have questions, don't worry, Bushrah is here for you. You can always reach out to her. We share her social media contact, and she's going to come back for another session. So you're definitely going to engage her for a very long time. So Bushrah, thank you very much for engaging with us today. Thank you. We wish you all the best. And we're looking forward to our next session. So thank
yeah,
you.
sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Bye,
Bushrah.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. We will see you tomorrow for our final section for the week. Have a lovely evening. Bye. Stop recording.